In this video, we are going to learn about the circular flow of income in a two-sector model. Now, the flow of income across different sectors of an economy, what gives rise to the circular flow of income. Now, before we go into the circular flow of income, let's try to understand the economies. There are two types of economies. One, the open economy, and the other, the closed economy. Open economy is that in which we have firms, households, government, and the rest of the world as the participants. Whereas in a closed economy, there are only two participants, the firms and the households. In this particular case, we are going to deal only with the closed economy. That is, in which we have only two sectors, the firms who are the producers and the households who are the consumers. Let's now discuss this in detail. Now we said in a closed economy there are two sectors, the firms or the production sector and the households or the consumption sector. Now the households are the owners of the factors of production. They are the owners of the production. Owners of the factors of production. What are the factors of production? Land, labor, entrepreneurship. Okay, so they are the owners of these factors of production. And the households also consume goods. The households consume goods. Now the firms produce goods and they make factor payments for the factor services or the factors of production. Right? Now, here we see in the circular flow that the households are providing factor services to the firms, for which the firms provide factor payments or the income for the factor services. Now, these households make use of these factor payments, that is their income, in consuming the goods and services. So, they make a consumption expenditure. What is consumption expenditure? The expenditure made on consumption of goods and services is called consumption expenditure. Now the firms produce goods and services to satisfy the household's needs. So the firms and the households depend on each other. The firms have a constant demand for the factors of production or factor services from the households. And the households have a continuous demand for goods and services that are produced by the firms. Hence, there is a continuous flow of factor services and the goods and services. That is, the factor services from the households for the firms and firms goods and services to the households. So what happens over here is the households and the firms are interdependent on each other. Now here we call it a circular flow because we assume that the households don't save anything. That is, they spent all the income earned in this process and they do not pay any taxes. Also, there are no imports from the rest of the world. Now here the entire circular flow in this economy is based on the axiom that one's expenditure is others' income, isn't it? So whatever the households spend goes to the firms and the firms in return produce the goods and services for the households. So the money keeps circulating between these two sectors and that is why it is called a circular flow. Now we learned that the households provide factor services and firms are providing goods. So here we find that there is a physical movement of goods or people or the labor is seen. Hence this is called a real flow because here the flow of goods and the factor services is tangible. The movement of intangible goods like the firms making factor payments and the households making a consumption expenditure using the money is called the money flow. Here only money makes a movement which is intangible. And hence this is called as the money flow. The money flow and the real flow are reciprocal to each other. So far we learnt only the two sectors. Now the introduction of the government sector makes it a three-sector economy. And if you introduce the financial sector like banks, then it becomes a four-sector economy. We also have, in an open economy, to deal with the rest of the world. So here we will see how these different sectors depend on each other in an open economy. This is an open economy. Okay. So for now we saw firms depend on household for factor services, and households depend on the firms for goods and services. Now the government sector, if you introduce, then the government has two things to do. One, to produce goods, and the other, welfare for the general public. That is the welfare agency. Now the firms depend on the government, that is, the government provides them with subsidies and the firms pay taxes. The government provides them subsidies and the firms in turn pay corporate tax. Likewise, the government provides them welfare to the households and the households pay income tax to the government. Then the households save their money in the financial sector and in turn they get what you call as interest on their deposits. So that is a saving. Now what happens to all that money that the financial sector receives? It gives to the firms as loans, and the firms in return pay the interest on the loans that they have taken. The financial sector also provides loans to the government, and the government in turn pays back the interest to the financial sectors. So this is called as intersectoral flow. This is called as the intersectoral flow, in which the households, the producers, the government and the financial sector are interdependent on each other. So where does the money go? The money keeps circulating between the different sectors, so there is no leakage. If any money from this circular flow goes out of the economy, then that is called as leakage. If there is a leakage, then the production activity would reduce. Let us say there is 1,000 units of the money circulating in the economy and there is a leakage of 100 units. Then the firms will be able to produce only units worth 900. So there is a leakage of 100 units. In case the government introduces some money into the circular flow, then that would be called as injection. That would be called as injection. If additional amount of money is introduced into the circular flow, we call it injection. Whereas if the money moves out of the economy, then that is called as the leakage. Now here I have drawn one more column and said this is the rest of the world. Since we are dealing with an open economy, we also depend on the rest of the world. So from the rest of the world, we import goods and services, and from the domestic economy, the rest of the world imports, so that we will call as exports for ourselves. So we export goods and services to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world we import goods and services from the rest of the world, and the rest of the world imports goods and services. For us, that would be called as the export. We export goods and services and we import goods and services from the rest of the world. Let us finally understand the significance of the circular flow of money in this model. Firstly, it helps us to understand the intersectoral interdependence. That means how the different sectors in the economy are depending on each other. then it also helps us to estimate the national income. How does it help us in estimating the national income? See, there are firms and households. We said the firms are producing goods and services which are used by the households. This is called as the value addition made by the firms. So the first method would be value addition method, in which the value of the final goods or the market value of goods and services is taken into account. Then next, the households make factor payments. That means they utilize all their income in buying the goods and services. With the assumption that they do not save any money, they would spend all their money on the goods and services to satisfy their needs. So this is called as, if all the incomes are put together, then we have the income method of calculating national income. What is this? This is the sum of all the factor incomes. The factor incomes are due to the factor services. What are those? They are the rent, profit, wages and interest earned by the households. Then the households also make consumption expenditure. The expenditure made on the final goods by the households is called as consumption expenditure. Now, when all the expenditure on these goods and services is put together, we get the expenditure method of calculating national income. So, whatever method we follow, the national income would be the same. Now, we are considering different aspects of the circular flow to calculate the national income. Okay.